I had to be responsible for the identity I was creating myself and what people were thinking of me. And that changed my life forever. And I had no one supporting me. Actually, most people I talked about said that I was in a cult.
When life's visible and hidden battles make you doubt that peace, love, and full-on living are possible, We Win Within brings the proof. Guests crack open their great stories that may overlap with what each of us carries, sharing raw truths, hard-won discoveries, and triumphs that illuminate the road for us all. I'm Hindy Stegman, daughter of Holocaust survivors, speaker, coach, and fellow journeyer in life, inviting you to listen, look inside, and claim the champion already rising in your heart.
Hi everybody. I'm Hindy Stegman, and I'm your host for the We Win Within podcast. And today we have another special guest, a woman that is just absolutely incredible. And when you hear her journey, I'm sure you'll feel the same. So welcome, Veenu Keller. How are you today, Veenu?
I'm doing amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. So, Veenu, take us on a journey of your life. And of course, as you know, everything starts with our childhood.
Yes,
So
it does.
take us back as far as you want, wherever you want, you go.
I think my journey would serve by starting at the very beginning of like what I remember. And sometimes what we remember is not exactly our truth. It's just kind of what's been told to us. And when we look back at our life, it all makes sense. So we go with that. So my parents had an arranged marriage in India in the late 60s. And my father was already here in America, in California. He had gotten his degree. He was an engineer for a big company and married my mom, brought her back to the States. And they had my brother in 1970 and then had me in 73. Between 1970 and 1973, the marriage was not working out. And in our culture, being from India, divorce is not prevalent. Like it's not everywhere. No one's getting divorced. People just you keep your dirty laundry at home, you figure it out, and you put a smile on your face when you walk out into public. Um, and so my mom being in America really started to recognize that there is a possibility for her freedom. And this isn't what her life destined was supposed to be with my father. And so she divorced him. So I never remember my parents ever being together. What I do remember is being shuffled back and forth to my dad's house on the weekends, picking us up. And
Sorry,
then
how old were you, Veenu, when that happened?
my earliest recollection was probably like 5 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, because I can see the house that they had once lived in together. I don't remember that, but my dad moved out, and that was the house that I remember growing up in until I was 6 years old. And then we moved to another house in
And how
California.
was that within your community? Because I'm sure that there weren't too many single mothers. Was that uncomfortable for you? That
As a child, because you don't know the difference, you see what you're missing out on. And at that time, I was the only person that I knew that was going between their mom and dad's house. My mom was the only single mom on our street. And what my mom tried to do is provide us a life in America, but yet it was still an Indian home. Like there was still cultural stuff that I was raised in. So there was a lot of confusion for me, and yet at the same time, you just learn that this is your life and this is what you live, and you don't know better. And so you don't know how to do better. This is it. And you compromise what could have been for what you're seeing. But, I never really thought about this till you asked me that question. But yes, we were the only single family on the street. And it was interesting because it seems like everybody kind of looked out for us. Like they knew my mom was a single mom. They knew she was going to law school. They knew she worked during the day. I think that people looked at us weird because one, we were the only colored people on the street. Um, and two, we were the only single family on the street. So there was a lot of I never felt segregated from my neighbors though. They always took us in. If they were having dinner, they'd be like, "Oh, why don't you guys come eat with us?" If they were taking their kids out to the movies, they would say, "Oh, go ask your mom if you could come to the movies with us." So I never felt left out in the community I grew up in. And but you know what? Life was different. We would ride our bikes everywhere. We had the park. I remember all the kids would come and play. Like I lived in a very family oriented area where all the kids would come out and play. And that's what I remembered. I remember, though, again, being in the culture that when the streetlights came on, my mom was calling my name to come in because in India, no self respecting girl is outside at dusk. And so I would be so upset because all my friends were still out there playing with their brothers and my brother was still out. So I felt like there was like a lot of unfairness. And I feel like that's where my filter of unfairness started to develop culturally, within myself. And then when I was 6 years old, going to a predominantly white and Hispanic school, I wasn't Hispanic and I wasn't white. The only Indian family that was going to that school at the time was my brother and I. And I remember this little boy when we were doing Boys Chase the Girls on playground. It was first grade. And I was getting ready to touch him, and he was really cute, blonde hair, blue eyes, freckles all over his face. And he says, "Don't touch me. I don't want to be black like you." And it was
Oh,
in that
ooh.
moment that I realized I was different. I don't think I ever felt different until that moment. I never saw my skin color, I don't think, until that moment. And then, as we've learned through personal development, like emotions stack. And so that's how filters become. And then I would go when my mom was going to law school, sometimes my grandparents would take care of my brother and I, and they would pick us up on a weekend and we'd stay the weekend with my grandparents, kind of give my mom a break to unwind and so if we weren't at my dad's or at my grandparents, and my grandma would say, "Oh, we got to scrub this color off of you. You're so dark." So it's like your safety of home, you're too dark. And maybe I took
Your
it that
grandma
way.
was, but wasn't your grandma Indian?
Yes, but my family was very light skinned. Indian is, I mean, the further you're up north in India, the lighter skin you are.
Right, right.
Like if you think of Asian, like Chinese and Japanese, like they're lighter skin. So the more north you go in Asia, the lighter skin you are. And so my
So
family
within your
was
own family, you were looked
the
on
darkest.
differently if you were darker.
Yep. And I was the darkest. I was darker than
Wow.
my brother. I was like, I mean, my grandfather on my mom's side had a brother they called Blackie. That was his nickname. It was a loving name, I guess, but like he was dark. He was darker than the rest of the family. So we had like relatives here and there that had darker skin, and that's how DNA worked. Lucky me. And so that's when we say persona, persona means mask. That's the mask I took on that I believed was my skin. And that is how I saw myself. So I saw myself bullied. I saw myself never fitting in. I saw myself realizing that if I wanted to be somebody, I had to be noticed. And I was raised in a family where it wasn't ladylike to be loud. It wasn't ladylike to have all this energy. And back then, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and at school, ADHD started to become popular in the late 80s. But I think by then, my mom was so enthralled with getting her law degree, becoming a lawyer, that she didn't pay much attention to that. My grades were always good. I was very self motivated. I wanted to be an A student because it felt good and I would get awards for it. So I realized to be significant in this world, I had to be the best. I had to be seen to be the best. So even though I was bullied, I would try out for every sport. I would try out for student council, knowing I would not win, knowing I wouldn't make it. But something taught me that you still got to go for it. Like, what are you going to learn from this? And there was nobody at home to really talk to this about. And I remember distinctly in eighth grade, and ironically, when I got my psych degree, they said 13, eighth grade is the hardest year of a child's transition life because they're literally trying to figure out their identity, going into high school. You're not young enough anymore to get away with it, and you're not old enough to do everything you want to do. And it's that age of who do I want to be? Who do my friends want me to be? Who does my family want me to be? Who do I want to be? And that was the year I became suicidal. That was the year that I said, I don't want to live anymore. I found myself praying to God, and I was born a Sikh. I grew up in the Sikh religion. I went to Sikh camps to understand the religion. Um, it was in a foreign language, and I only spoke English. My mom was, I found this out just a few years ago. I said, why didn't you ever teach me our mother tongue, which is Punjabi? And she says, I was ignorant. Like I came to a foreign country and I felt that if I taught you Punjabi, then you would be considered dumb if you didn't know English. And so she's like, I did the best thing I knew at the time. And so I don't know Punjabi. And so I knew there was a God. I've always had a very strong connection to spirituality. Like at 6 years old, I could see things. I got downloads. I like healing. Like I'd be able to move energy, but I never talked to anybody about it because I just thought it was weird, and I just kind of kept it to myself. And I used it for my own things. Like I would ask questions, I would get yeses and nos, and my intuition always led me. And so you know, at 13, I remember waking up and saying, God, if you love me the way I know you do, why do you let me live through this pain? Why do you make me go to school where all the bullying is? Why won't you just let me die? And finally at 15, I decided I was going to end my life. I got my mom's pills out. Now, mind you, my mom didn't like to take medicine. So even if it was like an antibiotic, it was in her cabinet and it was full pill boxes. Like she just did not like to take medicine. So I didn't know literally what I was going to take at 13. I mean, I'm sorry, 15. I was just all these pill bottles. I was just going to take them all. Hopefully one of them was going to do the trick. And I call this universe. I had a friend that showed up at my house right at that time, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And he was older than me. He drove. He went to a different high school, and I told him, I just said, "I don't want to live here anymore. Like I'm done." And he says, "This is ridiculous. You put the caps on, or I'm going to put the caps on, but I'm not going to let you do this." And so put the caps back on the pill bottle. And that's the closest attempt, I would say. Like I never really ingested anything or, you know, try to put a noose around it. Like I never did anything like that, but those were my attempts throughout my life.
So, question, your mom was a bright, intelligent woman going to be a lawyer, and I'm sure she loved you. And she was too busy to sense you hid it from her. You were a good actress. What was it that left you feeling so alone that you couldn't share that?
So I mentioned I had an older brother.
Yes.
He was 3 years older than me, and he became a drug addict. And so when he was 16 years old, he was sent to my father's house to live. And because my father would blame my mom for all the problems, he was in and out, getting in trouble with the law, ditching school. The schools were calling him. My mom's like, fine, if you could do better, you take him. And even though my brother and I had a very contentious, tumultuous relationship, like he would beat me up all the time and whatnot, if I was late getting home because I had the key around my neck, he would punch me like, oh, I've been waiting here for you. So like that was our relationship. But when he left, I felt like a piece of me left too, because he's the one, like back in the 70s, it was not abnormal for a parent to leave the older child alone with a younger sister. And my brother was 3 years older than me. So I was 4, he was 7. And we just had rules. You don't open the door. I'm going to ring once, hang up, and ring again. So you know it's me. Like he knew the rules. And you don't let your sister do anything, cooking, no nothing. We didn't have microwaves back then. We
Right.
just weren't allowed to use a stove. We made sandwiches. So when he left, I was devastated. It was an interesting emotional event that happened for me. And my mom I think, did the best that she could with what she knew. And so I remember at 13 telling her that I hated being Indian and I hated Gandhi because the movie Gandhi had just come out and people were making fun of me and calling me Gandhi because I think that was like the first understanding for these kids like, oh, Indians are real and Gandhi did this. So Venu must be like Gandhi. We're going to just one more thing to throw out there, you know? And my mom's like, kids are going to be cruel. You just have to be stronger. And that was it. That was it. Like there was nothing else. So in that moment, I knew I wasn't heard or seen or understood, but she only saw me through what because she was bullied in India. I mean, bullying is not just for colored people in America. Like bullying happens all over the world. You know,
Absolutely.
it's
Yep.
in your own culture, you know, Caucasian people bully Caucasian people. Like it's not,
You're too fat, you're too short, you're too skinny,
yeah,
you're too smart, you're too stupid, whatever. Too,
yes.
too.
Yes. And so I think my mom just saw it as another kid problem that she went through also in boarding school in India. And so I didn't think she saw the depth of it. And then I think there's a part of me as a child that felt, I don't want to put this on my mom. Like I already watch her, like she works so hard and I don't want her to feel ungrateful. And so I'm going to try to solve this problem on my own until I just couldn't. And so when I told her I was suicidal, because I came back, my friend picked me up. I came back and she's like, "Where were you?" And I'm like, "It's called suicide, mom." She stayed in my room all night, making sure I was breathing all night. Like, that's love. And the next day, she called out sick from work and she's like, "I have to take care of my daughter." So she took me to what she knew crisis. I saw a psychologist. I remember her name was Dr. McCullough. And she had an Indian friend who also was a psychiatrist that said, "Look, I know Venu's not going to talk to me because we're too close as friends. Let me give you a good referral." And then that day I was put in a psychiatric care hospital for 2 months on suicide watch. And that's where I learned behaviors to cut because I watched other people like, oh, that's a coping skill of pain. And honestly, I'm going to tell you what I do now working with families. When I'm going to go back to that moment when I would say, I'd pray to God, like, why don't you let me die? It's like now God says, do you know why I didn't let you die? I needed you to feel the feels and the emotions, and I needed you to get on the other side of it because you're going to be that conduit for families now. And that's exactly what I am now. When I talk to these parents, I was just talking to someone today, actually, where their child, 16-year-old boy was suicidal and the doctor's like, oh, he was laughing, maybe there's a psychiatric problem diagnosis. And I told the parents, I said, let me tell you, your 16-year-old doesn't want to die. What your 16-year-old wants is the suffering to stop, and the suffering is created from the stories they keep telling themselves about the pain. So until you can get to the source of the pain, know that they're not wanting to die. They want the pain to die. So we have to figure out how to recreate a safe and trusting, loving space for them to feel they can share what the pain is. Because in their mind, they don't have control of the pain. So they're trying to find things to cope with the pain. The minute you go to a psychiatrist and say, oh, let's give them coping skills, is you're telling the brain, I don't have control. So I have to find out how to cope with it, like the weather. The weather, we don't have control of the weather. So we have to cope with the weather. And so the minute we say, oh, let's give them coping skills for the personal harm, the self harm, or the suicide, we're literally telling their brain they don't have control over that. And that's not true. They do. They do have control over their mind and the way they're interpreting that pain and creating the suffering out of it. And that's exactly what I was doing. I was interpreting this pain as a forever thing. And so I didn't want to die. I wanted the pain to die. I wanted the suffering to die. And at 13 years old, at 15 years old, at 17 years old, even at 25 years old, I wasn't seeing an out because I had this filter of pain is always constant in my life.
Vinu, give me an example of coping skill that might be offered to a child who is suicidal.
Again, I would not say there's a coping skill for a suicidal child. If you want your child to not be suicidal, it's name the emotion. You know, I'm curious, do you want to die or do you want the pain to die?
Now, how many parents ask that question to their kid?
None. None.
Right.
Nobody asked me. Nobody asked me that. And I don't think until I got into the work. So, I'm going to kind of fast forward for time's sake. You know, even as an adult, I tried to escape my life by marrying at 18. I found this beautiful man who was really good looking. He was a Marine. He loved me. He was hot. I loved him for what I knew love was. And I married him after 5.5 months of knowing him. 2 years later, we have our first son, but now we're stationed in North Carolina, away from my family and my friends. So here I am alone again. He becomes abusive physically when he drank. But I had this, I don't want to be like my mom, a single mom of 2 kids, trying to make ends meet. And that's exactly what I created, right? Tell God your plans and then he's going to laugh. So it's exactly what I created because I knew it after 12 years of marriage that the only hope I had for my children was to get away from this guy because what we were modeling was not what love was. And I wanted my boys to have a better opportunity at a better relationship. And here's the ironic part. I didn't even know what love relationship was. I never saw it in my home. I knew what a mom love relationship looked like, and it didn't really look great either. But I knew I loved my mom. I knew she did everything for me. And to this day, she's my hero. She sent me away to boarding school, by the way, because she was so afraid she was screwing me up that she's like, let me get her back to the culture that I know where it's safe and she's monitored and there's teachers there all the time. So, I can't monitor her all the time and I don't want to put her in a hospital because she didn't want to put me on meds and that's all they wanted to do. So she did the best that she could. Now I'm divorced with 2 kids and I've created a cycle of relationships of being abused in my relationships, either mentally, physically, or emotionally. And then I come to a Tony Robbins event. In 2007, by the grace of God, I meet this stranger, spend the weekend with my good friend and her friend's daughter was going to crewing for Tony Robbins. They're walking on fire, and I'm thinking they're crazy to walk on fire. And next thing you know, I'm at a Tony Robbins event in Atlanta, 2007. And I was not going to walk on fire because I was very in my head that I didn't want to burn my feet because even though I was going to kill myself in 2016, I still needed my feet. And then I did it. I walked on fire and I thought to myself, if I could do that, what else can I do? Because my brain said I couldn't do it, but my body did. And so what else? So I made a commitment at that UPW that I was going to live. I was no longer going to carry the identity of suicidal. It was no longer mine. And honestly, I've had the question, what was the scariest decision I've ever had to make in my life? And that was it. I had to choose life because now I had to be responsible for my actions. I had to be responsible for the debt I was accruing. I had to be responsible for the identity I was creating myself and what people were thinking of me. And that changed my life forever. And I had no one supporting me. Actually, most people I talked about said that I was in a cult. I was being brainwashed. And then I thought, well, if this is brainwashing me to be a better who I am and create a better identity, then my brain definitely needs to be washed because it was full of a lot of stuff that was guiding me down a very dark path. So I would come back and I would volunteer for every event I could. Actually, that's where you and I met that many years ago.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was there. One of our close friends, Lawrence Lahav, said to me, you got to clean up your own backyard before you go clean up somebody else's. And that's what I was willing to do. It took years. I was just there to clean up my own backyard, to meet people who supported me in cleaning it up, people who didn't judge me for who I was at that time, but supported me and saw me. And Lauren said to me one day, she says, you got to believe in you. And I said, I don't even know what that looks like. She goes, great. So I'm going to believe in you for you. And when you're ready, you can take it over. And I'll never forget that. She told me that in 2008. And it took a long time. It took a long time for me to really believe in myself because here's what we don't know. We hear self-worth, we hear self-esteem, and we hear self-love. But when you're raised not knowing what those words mean, how do you create it? What we're dealing with now in the world is kids that think self-worth and self-esteem come from social media, the likes, the comments. So they don't even have a true definition of what that looks like inside. So there is no coping skill. The coping skill is getting to the cause of what's creating these mindsets. And it's like I tell my kids all the time, my kids don't have social media, but they do watch YouTube reels, which is just like TikTok and Instagram. So I'm not blind to that. But they don't have an account where nobody can like message them. They can just kind of scroll. And I tell them, I said, spend more time listening to positive things because when you let weeds grow in your brain, you're going to have to weed it out so the good stuff can grow, or the weeds will suffocate the good stuff. And we talk about things, when I see them saying things, when they like the word 6, 7, like we've really come to the world where a number is our word of the year for last year. Like that was just like mind blowing. And the fact that kids didn't even know what that meant was even mind blowing to me. And that parents, like I put it on my social media, I did a whole blog on it. And parents were like, I thought it was cute. I said, is it cute when you look at the meaning? And that words hold energy. And so if we're saying these words and we're putting it out and we think it's cute, what are we enabling in our children? And when we ask ourselves, where have we lost the word of respect for elders? Like you could be in a store now and you're looking at something and a kid would literally look at you and go, what are you looking at? I would never in a million years ask an adult that. There's a line of respect that's no longer there. Kids, the way they talk to teachers, I've been in schools and I listen to how kids are talking to teachers. There's no more, we are your elders, respect us. There's now of, this is my world and your world, and you need to respect me.
There's no
And
question that we've lost that. But I just want to go back for a second. Um, Help me to understand when you chose to go on your path of working on yourself and doing the work and volunteering with Tony Robbins, how did that affect your kids at that time? Because you had kids from your first marriage, right? And then later
yes,
on your second marriage. But let's go back to your kids from your first marriage because at that time you were struggling, let's say emotionally with the self-worth and all those things. And as mothers, we do I always say we did the best we could with the tools we had, but there's no question that our children are affected by who we were. So as you started to transition or change, did that help? Did you see that change in your children?
thank you for that question because I think this is part of probably the most important thing that I can say is we parent out of our wounds. And so the low self-worth, the low self-esteem, it was installed in my children, not on purpose. I didn't say, oh, I'm going to teach you to not have self-worth, self-esteem. But then I look back at my mom even today. My mom doesn't have self-worth or self-esteem. My mom can't take a compliment. My mom, if you say, oh, that was so good. Oh, thanks. But you know what? It was so hard to get the temperature right. And oh my gosh, I can't even tell you what it took, but it should have been this way. She just can't take a compliment.
Yeah.
And that was enlisted in on me. And so as I started to change, my parenting started to change. We say we're not going to do what hurt us the most. So I didn't yell at, well, I did yell at my kids. I yelled all the time because that's what I was raised in. And even though I said I wasn't going to do it, I did it. And now, as I was changing who I was, and I realized that we yell to be seen and heard, and that we train the brain to only respond to the yelling. So now I had to retrain their brain to respond to connection, to communication, to collaboration instead of control. I taught my kids that in order to have safety, you had to control because that's what I was doing. I didn't show them safety could come from love. And so my youngest at the time, I think, was like 9. And then my oldest was 12. And so it was really, I started to shift in the middle of their big shifts. And it's interesting because one of my sons still crew. He still goes to Tony Robbins when he can. He listens to podcasts. I would say he's much more evolved, and that was the younger one. My older one, he thinks Tony Robbins is a lot of hoorah and too much energy for him. I can appreciate that too. But I also can see they can see the change in me. And they are my biggest cheering fan club. When Tony says, create raving fans, I would say my boys are my raving fans. When I look at them and I get kind of emotional and I have an accomplishment, they're the ones that says, I know you were going to do this, and I thank them. I wrote a book, Teach Your Children That They're Enough, and I dedicated that book to them, for giving me the teaching that I needed to realize that presence was so important as growing up, and to not shame and blame, and to celebrate their wins, because I wasn't raised celebrating, so I didn't celebrate them. And here's what I have to say to parents. It's never too late. And I do believe that God gave me a redo with my twins who are now 13. So I have a almost 32-year-old and I have 13-year-old boy-girl twins. And I raise them differently. And I think the biggest compliment I get from my boys is when they get so fed up with me, they're like, you raised them so differently. And I'm like, thank God. Thank God I do. Right. I mean, because there's a lot more, not negotiating, but there's a lot more communication, which can be mistaken for negotiating. But no, I want them to be heard. The fact that my daughter, when she's upset, says, you're not listening to me. Ugh, I need to go to my room. And I say, well, go to your room. I am listening to you, but you're right. Through your filters, you're not being heard. So I'm going to let you get all unreactive and then we'll have a conversation about it. I have friends that are like, oh, you're so hard on her. Am I though? Because I give her space and because I feel like as a parent, it's up to me to set a standard and to not just let her 13-year-old mind think that's the standard, to know that there's not a ceiling of what the standard could be, and to get her to regulate through her body what she's feeling and to give her choice. And sometimes it looks hard. And if you stick through it and you see the results of what hard is, it's actually a beautiful outcome at the end because it gives her space. It gives her the opportunity to know that whoever she's becoming is not, I'm not judging. And although at times it feels judgy, we talk about it. And that's stuff I would never have done with my boys. It was you're not doing that. Don't ask me why. I'm the parent and that's it. Now it's like, help me understand why you want that. I mean, because in my mind, it's a no. And I'm going to explain why it's a no. There's a safety issue that comes with it. If you can help me solve the safety issue and I know you're going to be safe with this, then it can possibly be a yes. So to me, that's not negotiation. That's us having an understanding. It's me helping her develop her frontal lobe as it's developing and understanding reasoning and organization and self-care and self-safety.
Veenu, I think what's so important to understand for parents is if we have something going on with one of our children or more than one of our children, and we look for help for them, we need to help them to get better. We need to help them to change. But very often we don't look at ourselves and say, this kid is a product of my motherhood and my relationship with my husband or no husband or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And we look over there and we blame them and we want to fix them. Mm-hmm. But they can be going for therapy night and day if they're living in that home with the parent or parents who are toxic or haven't worked on their own issues. How does that kid stay on top of what's going on? It's like they take 2 steps forward and then 1 step backward. So how do we get the parent to understand it, to look at themselves?
That is a beautiful, you asked the best questions. I love it. So that's what the difference is between my coaching. I am known as the parent-child whisperer. And the reason why is it's not just the child, it's the parent. I am the bridge. I am the conduit that helps them learn. So if I'm working with your child on self-love, self-care, I got to coach the parents on what that looks like and how they're modeling it. And the words that they're saying is contradictive to what I'm teaching your child. And so getting them to look at, and when I do that and I do it through their child, they start to realize they're like, I didn't know that even for myself. And I'm like, great. So what do you need to do for yourself? How would you need to show up? How would you need to model that for your child? What's the conversations you need to have? And a lot of them don't know. And that's why I created these cards called Chatter Matters that have 10 different categories, 10 different questions to open your child up to having that safe, loving, trusting space to have the dialogue, to ask these type of questions. Like there's a whole category on self-esteem, self-love, and self-worth that asks these probing questions. But here's the deal. You have to answer them yourself as well.
Right.
And it's great because like one of the questions that and so our stepdaughter who doesn't live here, sometimes she'll ask us, she'll say, have you guys done Chatter Matters today? And I'm like, no, we're getting ready to. Wait, I'm almost home. I just left my boyfriend's house. I want to do it with you. So she'll FaceTime with us and then she'll pick a card. And one of the questions she got was, when you're upset, what is your strategy to not feel stressed out, or whatever the question is? I don't know it specifically. And she says, well, I'm going to tell you what me and my boyfriend do. We will tell each other we need 5 minutes. So that means if we're FaceTiming, if we're together, it's like we're going to get off, we're going to go to separate rooms. We're going to take 5 minutes to take a breath, to calm down, and to come back together to talk about it. And I said, number one, it shows me that she's in a healthy relationship, which I would never have known if she didn't get that question. Number two, it's a great model for her younger brother and sister who still kind of fight, being twins. And so is that something that we can adopt as a family? And then we all went around and talked about what we all do. So there was like 5 of us with different strategies and opportunity. And what does that do? It builds connection. It teaches us each other's formula. It gives new ideas. And that's really what parents need to do. They need to open the question, the dialogue, and they need to be vulnerable.
So let me understand. This Chatter Matters is a group of cards
Yes.
that parents do with their children.
Yes. So it's these cards. I know we're on video. Chatter Matters. There's 10 different categories.
Okay.
And they can pull a card like, how do you feel when you accomplish something difficult? Who asked their kids that? I've never been asked that, even as an adult. How does it make me feel when I've accomplished something difficult? It makes me feel worthy. It makes me feel appreciated. It builds my self-worth about myself that I was capable of doing it. And I'm modeling these words. And then guess what my kids do? They're like, oh, it makes me feel really good inside. And then I might say, how specifically? I don't know. Like if it was difficult, it was hard to do, and I put the effort in, it makes me feel really good when it's done. Yeah, it does.
So
And
is
so,
everybody, sorry, is
no,
everybody answering the same question? Like, is there somebody picks a card and that's the card for the group? So everybody has to answer the same thing and talk about it from their perspective? Or does everybody pick an individual card and say
so,
what's going on?
so here's what's great. There's no rules. So in our
Oh,
family, we each pick a card and everyone there answers the same question. And then the next person picks a card and then we all answer their question. And so if there's 5 of us, we're all 25, we got 25 answers coming. And but you know what? This is where we lose time because no one's looking at the clock. They're just interested in the answer. And it's so fun. I was just doing one of my in-home turnarounds where I move in with families for 4 days. And this is one of the family activities we did one night. And I remember the son's like, I'm not playing. And so I said, okay, you don't have to play, but you also can't sit here with us and bring that energy. So here's your options. You can go to your room until we're done and have your free time and your free space, or you could play the game. And he chose to play the game with the second question, he was the second person to draw. He was happy again and he was in it because we directed his thought of needing control to feel safe and being a part of a family and establishing safety as a family by establishing vulnerability, by establishing dialogue, by being open without judging. Because the only rule we really say is that you can't judge anyone for their answers. We're just going to receive the answers for what it is. And actually, it's turning into an app. And on my app, there's going to be questions for like younger kids, because these are probably questions for like 10 and above, although people can get them and kind of restate the question to help their kid understand it. But on my app, that's going to be coming out hopefully in a month, you're going to have two options to do these questions or do the younger kids' questions.
What's the app going to be called?
Chatter Matters.
Silly question. Okay. So, help me to understand. I have an issue with one of my kids, and I get in touch with you how?
Through my website, veenuinspires.com, VEENUINSPIRES.com. And I made it easy for everybody because that's my social media too. Veenu Inspires. And I'm very, very accessible through social media. My email's on my website. They can.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand. We make a time, we talk and decide that I think it's going to be a great idea for you to move into my house for 4 days,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
now you are doing your thing with the family, whatever that thing is, and maybe you could explain it further or not. But I've got years of stuff going on in my house. What happens after the 4 days?
That's where the work begins. So it's a 4-day intensive intervention where I live in your house. Most people have a guest room for me to stay in. And we do a pre-call before I come. So I know exactly what we're going to be working on. You know exactly what I'm going to be working on. Obviously, years of wounds and stress and trauma are not going to be resolved in 4 days, but we're going to get to the cause of all of it. And normally I can tell you what it is. People don't feel safe, so they need control. And then after I leave, we schedule our coaching. So we start doing coaching. Generally, it starts out weekly, and then it kind of goes into bi-weekly, how you need me. And then after about 2 or 3 months, you're bringing me back in for 2 more days. I'm going to move back in for 2 days because we're going to level up. We're going to kind of take, um, uh, what is the word I'm looking for? Inventory of like where we're at. You know, what's been great, what has changed, what are some of the little things we need to start tweaking now? You know, the 2 millimeter shifts that we need to make. And you still have coaching afterwards too. So there's 24 sessions of coaching. So, you know, we talk about going to seminars. Like you and I have been into personal development more than just Tony Robbins. We've been to other people too. And you go to this intensive workshop for 4 days, 6 days, 10 days, and then you come home and now you're like, now what? Like I feel a change inside of me, but because patterns are so easy to go back when you don't have someone holding you accountable for them. And that's what most people need. I will say I am probably a rare person because going back to my journey in personal development, I mentioned I didn't really have anybody, but that's why I went back and I volunteered so I can create my peer group to hold me accountable. So the next event I went to, people are saying, "Oh, how are you doing? Are you still not drinking? Are you still not smoking? I'm so proud of you. Oh, you created your own business. Oh my gosh, Veenu." So I had cheerleaders. So I didn't have them every day in my life, but I knew I was going to obviously volunteer for another event the next month. So I had like almost like a 30-day to get my stuff together because I know somebody was going to care enough to ask me like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Look at what you're doing." And that encouragement kept me going. So
So
you do have,
I'm
yeah,
just curious, sorry to interrupt, that do the and I maybe it's a silly question, but who gets it sooner, the kids or the parents?
the, oh, I mean, the kids are the easiest to redirect their behavior and change it
Right,
instantly. Like the younger, the better.
right.
The younger, the better. And people think that's interesting because the older you get, the more you can rationalize.
Mm-hmm.
But behaviors aren't rational.
Mm-mm.
Behaviors aren't rational. Behaviors are
Right,
instinctive.
right.
So it's actually the younger, the better. So I've done in-home turnarounds with as young as 2, 3 year olds, like sleeping, getting them out of their parents' bed, doing the routine at home and getting a routine and structure. But the parents are the ones who start to recognize how they created these patterns in their kids because they're their patterns from where they were raised.
That's really my question is do they really start to recognize and shift?
When you got someone in your house that's up at 5 a.m. because you guys are going to be up at 6 and I'm already in your kitchen waiting for you, and you go to bed at 11, that means I'm going to my room at 11:30 to make sure everything's good. You start to recognize because it's intensive. Like we're talking, like when the kids are at school, because I generally come on a Wednesday night so everybody can get to know me. I probably get there around dinner, a little after. And then Thursday, we start. And the kids are at school. So that's when the work becomes imperative between me and the parents. So I'm setting them up while the kids are away. We have our time to coach. We have our time to look at old patterns. We look at childhood wounds. We discuss them. And here's the deal, how I get people out of trauma. Trauma is based on a significant event that happened that has an emotional response to it. So I get them to undo that emotional response to see it just as an event. And so we can move through that quickly.
That's
And then we
amazing.
start working through. Now the kids are coming home, and now we're immediately going to start with a routine and structure. And so that's how we move. And then by the time I leave, it's Sunday. And I leave Sunday evening. I'm East Coast, so it's sometimes hard to get a flight out in the evening to get where I'm going. So sometimes I leave Monday morning. But Sunday, I'm like behind the wall. Like I'm letting parents, because the kids and the parents need to see it's not happening because Miss V's in the house. That's what people
Right.
call me, Miss V.
Yeah.
Miss V's not in the house. It's like this is the new way. Because the 10-year-olds are like, are you just doing this because of Veenu? Are you just doing this because Miss V's here? And the parents are like, no, this is it. She came here to teach us. We're here to learn, and we're here to do it.
I'm really fascinated. I'm sitting and listening to you, and so many of us have been through therapy. And you can be in therapy for years and still be talking about my mother, my father, my sister, my brother. And yeah, you take baby steps and then you go back and then you're almost in a codependent relationship. So I know people that are in codependent relationships with their therapists for, the last 10 years.
That
And
was
this
me.
sounds amazing that over I don't know what period of time, with your coaching and everything else, but it seems to me that because of your intuitive skills, it's not just the structure and whatever, but you're able to sort of like the rotor rooter go in there and figure it out quickly for them and help them to see that. Am I
100%.
hallucinating or is
Nope.
that
That's it. I was talking to a gentleman, Dr. Tennant's. He does the scalar energy stuff. And I went and I did a session with him, and my son did. We did 3 sessions with him. And he says, I've only met a doctor that can literally see the scalar energy of people. And I'm like, well, I wouldn't put me on like there's my win for my mom. Oh, I wouldn't put me with a doctor. But he's like, the fact that you can go into a home, see the child's behavior, and know exactly where it's coming from. I said, yeah, I can tell you exactly where it's coming from. And I don't know how, and I don't know why. And it's not something I can teach because it's something I just know. And that's how I get it done. 100%. And because most children, they won't need to take control if they feel there is control. And I'm here to change control into collaboration. How do we collaborate together? Because that's where the world is going. Back in the day, us kids felt safe when mom and dad said no, and we knew we were going to get in trouble and we knew what the boundaries were. We felt safe. That does not exist anymore. Now we got both parents working. If you're lucky, you have a parent home, but we're raised from the outside world. Um, and safety comes when we're collaborating on things. My kids feel safe because it's not a hard no all the time. I'm going to say no right now because I'm busy and you're asking me thinking you're going to get a yes. So when I'm not busy, we can discuss it again. So it's not negotiation, it's collaboration. How can we collab on this? I need to know you're safe. If you can come up, and now my kids come to me and they're like, okay, here's the plan. Here's what we want to do. Here's who's going to pick us up. Here's where we're staying. Like they already have the safety plan because they know that's where I'm going to go with it. My husband and I don't have a problem with our kids being social. We just need to know they're going to be safe in that because this world has gotten more crazy and I don't want my kids kidnapped. I need to make sure that there's some supervision where I know they're going to be where they're going to be. We have Life 360 now. Like there's different ways that we can keep tabs on
Right.
our kids that our parents didn't have when we were riding our bikes across the park. And then we had to get to our neighbor's house and say, okay, call me as soon as you get there. And you have to call on the phone. And so there's as scary as the world's become, there's also safety tactics that we have now that never existed before.
Well, I think that what's so important is, we hear the words intergenerational trauma. It's really big. Intergenerational trauma. Yes. And I think 90% of us living in the world have some sort of intergenerational trauma that we picked up. But if we're willing to do the work now, then our grandchildren won't have to talk about intergenerational trauma, right? They can just talk about tools in the toolbox to handle the problems because life is full of problems. I mean, right? I mean, I don't care who you
Always
are,
going to have them. You solve
always.
one, there's going to be another one right behind it.
But and they don't teach these things in school. They don't teach how to handle bullying. Forget about being a bully, what to do when you are being bullied. And yes, I know there's bullying programs, but you know what? I know too many children. I know too many people that have suffered and suffered in silence for some of the reasons you talked about. They don't want to upset their parent. Maybe their parent is a single parent or an immigrant parent. And if they're an immigrant parent, they don't want to upset them even more. And they don't want them talking to the teacher. And they don't, and these cycles that we keep going through. Why?
So there's two things I want to say. First, with the bullying, if somebody would have called that little cute boy that had the freckles and the blue eyes and said, when you said that to her, did you see it hurt her feelings? Like, let's teach empathy there.
Right.
And says, were you trying to make her cry? Well, no, but I didn't want the color. Because remember, the 70s was like right when we were getting rid of the segregation, you know, and we only knew black and white. Like, we weren't talking about Asian, Indians. Like we were still a new population to people. I mean, I'm going by what I was seeing when I was growing up, right? So when we teach empathy of like, when there is kids that are bullying, saying, does it make you feel good to make them cry? If so, what power are you getting from that? And could you get your power somewhere else? Like no one's talking to the bully about it because guess what? The bullying is doing it because they want significance. And they just don't know how else to get it because they've either been modeled that, taught that, encouraged to do that. Like whatever it is, we have to flip the switch. That's one thing. The second thing is when we talk about generational trauma, whatever that big word is, it does get passed on to us when we're in the womb, coming from two different DNAs, the generational trauma. But for me, I've released it through doing plant medicine. And I don't know if that's okay to talk about here, but I just want to be vulnerable of like where my true healing came. Like I healed all this cerebrally through going through personal development and learning I can change the story and looking at strategy and looking at the how. Now I'm looking at the who I am, the whose I came from, the who's in my life, and releasing that in the generational because I don't want my granddaughter to have to go through this. I don't want my great granddaughter to go through this. I don't want my great 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 granddaughter. I'm a cycle breaker. And I believe you're a cycle breaker, Hindy. The people that I'm coming in contact with are cycle breakers. We've recognized there's something more in this ecosystem of humanity. And that's why I don't listen to the news. When I hear about things, I'm like, what does that mean that she was a mom too? And I'm trying to Google. And the fact that I have to go through all of that shows that I'm really not in it. Like, we all have a journey here in this human body. And I am just a conduit. I'm a conduit of helping parents understand that there's a greatness in them, to see the greatness in their child, to get out of the ego and really parent from our genius. Your kids chose you for a reason, to be a guide. You don't own your children. They're not our property. I say I have 6 kids, but all 6 of them are not mine. My body was a tool for them to come through this world, and they chose me to be a guide. And if this doesn't resonate with you, you're not going to be listening to this anyway. And those that are listening, you're probably like, oh my gosh, she's speaking my language. And so knowing that I don't have ownership of these children, knows that I can guide them the best that I know how. And the only way I know how is I do plant medicine journeys. When plants call me, I go. My older sons do plant medicine journeys with us. You know, they're 27 and 31. My husband does plant medicine journeys because we don't have trauma bond. That doesn't exist in our life. When you talk to my 27-year-old or my 31-year-old, they're like, gosh, what you went through with your mom. And they're like, thank God. Thank God I had that mom. You know, when you talk about their father not being in their life, especially the 27-year-old, he's like, and that's how it was supposed to be. He doesn't have the trauma anymore connected to his father, who is in his life, if you want to say it, but is not really. And he doesn't have an emotional attachment. I'm like, do you feel like you need to work through it? He's like, work through what, mom? He made a choice. And I'm who I am because of those choices. And I'm okay with that. It's that blame effectively. And he's not owning that. That's his dad's stuff. That's not his stuff. And he's just choosing not to own it anymore and to feel free in his body. And so, because I'm a generational, cycle breaker, my son is too. And my twins are going to be too, when they come to it. But they get the benefit of it. My daughter has intuition. My son has intuition. We talk about it because I want them to know it's a gift. It's not a taboo. And to tap into that and to feel special in your right that you were chosen. Because honestly, all of us, every single one of us on this world has intuition. It's just, are you ready to tap into it?
Yes. Yes. And the more we tap into it, the more sensitive we become to receiving. And sometimes it can be really scary, especially for kids that don't, really
It
know
was
what's
scary.
going on.
I'm gonna be honest, it was scary for me when I'm like seeing things with my eyes open in my room and I'm seeing geometric dimensions and spirits and stuff, and they're healing, and it's like, wow, what's the message here, and like, what are you doing? And it's interesting. We can go down a whole nother rabbit hole with that, but my point
No,
is
that's a whole
that,
other rabbit hole, and maybe
yeah.
for another
So
time.
my I appreciate being able to be on your podcast and speak openly about my journey, because it's been a beautiful journey. There's not one regret I have, not of a choice. And we could say that, but I feel that like there's nothing in my body that says that was a regret. I've been on some of the biggest stages, speaking at events. I'm writing my next, it's going to be a bestseller. It's called Parenting from Greatness. I'm putting it out there. It's going to be published by August 11th of this year. It's my birthday, so we're gonna finish this year off strong for me, because I believe our new year starts with our birthday. So, yeah, I'm going to finish strong with that. So be looking for that book, Parenting from Greatness by Veenu Keller. It's a book that's been downloaded, and I'm just bringing it into consciousness.
Beautiful. That's my daughter's birthday also,
Yes,
August 11th.
great
So
day to be born.
it is. Every day is a great day to be born. And
It is.
if we only realized if we only realized how great we all are, each and every
Yes.
one of us has a unique gift. And for some of us, it takes us longer to realize than others, but that's our journey and our path. And today we talked about so many interesting things. If you had one thing to say, one gift, one pearl of wisdom that we haven't discussed, what would that be, Veenu?
Be curious and not critical. Be curious of life, not critical. Be curious of your children, not critical. Be curious of your relationships with your partners, not critical. Be curious of yourself, most of all, not critical. We've spent our life learning how to self beat. It's now we learn how to self build. And Hindy, I think you and I are examples of it's never too late to make shifts and wanting more, because when you know better, you could do better.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, well, I am kind of in the senior citizen category. So, um,
Who doesn't age, by the way. She's not aged at all.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Veenu. This has been amazing. And for anybody that's listening and you want more information, remember Veenu Inspires. You can check out her social media and just know that there is options out there. There is options, and be kind and be gentle. So thank you, Veenu. It's been just amazing. Bye-bye.
Thank you.